Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Talking Utilities video that we're doing this time with Jessie Burley from the Town of Breckinridge. Today, we are talking about a pretty cool experience or decision that was made up in Summit County that affects not just Summit County, but a couple of their neighbors that has to do with heat. And what is the future of making sure that we can provide heat to homes and communities up there? A lot of us, the traditional way that we get our heat is through gas-powered heat, but there's actually this decision that was made that involved Xcel Energy, and like I said, a bunch of communities up in Summit County, is a decision that could help move more people over to a cleaner cleaner heat home. So as a reminder, anytime any utility that's a for-profit utility in Colorado has to propose something or has a plan or a proposal, that goes to the Public Utilities Commission here in Colorado. They are our commission, our regulatory body. We did a video with their director if you want to learn more about what the PUC does, and I'll put a link to that down below. So this proposal that we're going to talk about had to go before the Public Utilities Commission. And so we'll learn a little bit more about who was proposing what and what actually happened. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Jessie here. Jessie, if you'll just introduce yourself, give a little bit of background on kind of what, who do you work with, who do you represent, and then maybe just a real quick summary of what was at stake, so to speak. What was the thing that this proposal, was really dealing with?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me and having this conversation. It's really exciting. And as a local community working in this space, we're really excited to help implement this project. So as you said, my name is Jessie Burley. I'm the Sustainability and Parking Manager here for the Town of Breckinridge. And myself and my team are responsible primarily for implementing the town's Sustainable Breck Plan, which consists of climate action goals, clean energy, water conservation, materials management, and mobility. So we get to kind of do all the fun special projects for the Town of Breckinridge. But related to the Mountain Energy Project, the Town of Breckinridge became really interested in this primarily because of our climate goals. So we have a regional climate action plan that was passed in 2019. And when the utility came forward with this proposal, basically what we heard loud and clear was that we have a gas supply problem. So the utility was in a position where they were forecasting out the growth of the area and the demand on the system that they were forecasting, and they determined that they would not be able to supply that amount of gas given the infrastructure that we have in place today. And so as you mentioned, anytime the utility wants to build or do something, they have to go to the regulatory body. And in this case, they did in the form of the Mountain Energy Project. And the reason why this project was so special was because it was proposed as a hybrid solution instead of a conventional natural gas pipeline replacement or expansion. They were really looking at ways to shift the demand from gas heating to electrification. And so ultimately, they proposed kind of three categories or three buckets of solutions. The first was supplemental supply for the gas system. These are temporary LNG and CNG stations that can help back up the system on really, really cold days. So that's a kind of still a traditional measure. The second is what we call NPAs in the industry, or non-pipeline alternatives. And this is looking at retrofitting old buildings as well as new construction and electrifying the space heating in those uses. And then the third bucket is investment in the electric side, so that as these buildings electrify, there's enough capacity on the grid in order to support that. And I will note just on the electric side that what was brought forward was going to be brought forward regardless of the Mountain Energy Project, just because of all the electrification happening between transportation and then new construction as well. So that's kind of the overarching purpose behind Mountain Energy.
Yeah, so for those of us, for those of you who live in the mountains, I think you oftentimes experience it can be challenging to get the stuff you need up to those mountains, and that includes, it sounds like, gas. So we have kind of a limited pipeline infrastructure to get gas up there. And so if we did a more traditional, heating experience, gas heating experience, it sounds like there was a challenge. Excel was flagging that there was a challenge here to be able to provide all those, the growth in your community with gas. So it sounds like then at the end of the day, there was a need to try something different and kind of go bigger, I guess you can say, into some of the electric heat programs. And it sounds like that fit very nicely with your climate goals as well.
That's right. And originally the supplemental gas portion of the proposal was um while still temporary, had a really long time frame on it, and we were very concerned about that, right? We felt like that was sort of locking us into this perpetual reliance on natural gas. And so while in the short term it can help with the resiliency and the safety of the system, in the long term we want to be moving away from that. And so that was part of our advocacy as the Mountain Community Coalition, was to try to say, hey, look, let's really try these no and low cost solutions, or no regrets solutions, I should say, to try to electrify and not continue to be dependent on fossil fuel heating.
Yeah. And you mentioned part of this is driven by your climate goals. Did you have some sense of how much pollution, climate pollution was associated with, homes and, sort of gas in homes? Is a large amount, a small amount?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do greenhouse gas inventories every 3 years, and in Breckenridge, 2/3 of our um, emissions come from buildings.
Oh, wow.
And according to Excel's analysis, of that 2/3, most of it is residential. So you can we don't have heavy industry here. We have large commercial in terms of lodging and our ski area, but primarily we're looking at residential, a lot of single family homes, to some extent multifamily. And so we were really able to home in on that uh, bucket of the building segment to really look at what solutions could be available there, and then recognizing that that's 2/3 of our emissions in Breckenridge.
Wow, wow. So what was, as you went down this process, what was the challenges that were identified if it was sort of the quote unquote business as usual gas process, and what were the benefits if there was kind of more of an emphasis on the heat pumps and cleaner heat technology?
Yeah, so while this was not officially proposed in the application, Excel did share sort of that alternative analysis in terms of cost. So a conventional upgrade to the pipeline to solve this particular problem, we were looking at something like $300 million. And so when you combine that, we're a relatively small county. Neighboring Grand County and Lake County are also impacted by this. We're not very big, right? And so you're looking at a $300 million investment for a really small part of the system. And so in looking at the hybrid solution, we were able to cut that cost in half. And then due to stakeholder advocacy, we were able to, at least in the early years, reduce that cost by a couple more $1 million, by not building out the supplemental gas supply to the extent that was originally proposed. So there was a settlement agreement in this proceeding, and so there were a lot of negotiating points where we were able to kind of whittle down that cost even further.
Wow, that's great. So, heat pumps is one technology I think about when I think of a different type of heat. If you get away from the traditional gas, there may be other technologies too that you all explored, but it's been around for a while, but it's still relatively new for some people. Can you talk a little bit about, you're in a colder part of the state. Is it really possible to get a lot of your heat in homes from more of these electric heat pump technologies?
Yeah, I'd like to start by saying everybody that has a refrigerator has a heat pump in their home. It's the same type of technology. You walk through your kitchen and you put your hand underneath your fridge and you can feel hot air coming out of it. So it's the same type of thing. You're basically moving heating, heat from one area to another using refrigerant and pumps. So heat pump technology has been around a long time. What has really shifted the game in terms of heating in the last few years is that manufacturers have made cold climate technology so that that heat pump can work at its higher level of efficiency down to colder temperatures. And so, 20 years ago, you mentioned heat pump, and they might only work down to 40 degrees. And then after 40 degrees, the efficiency of that system goes down, right? And so the cold climate technology, we're seeing heat pumps on the market that can go down to -5, -10 degrees, and that cold temperature is continuing to get colder in the technology space. And so it's really opened up a lot more opportunity in climate zones like where we are in Breckinridge, to implement this technology with confidence that we don't need full backup systems. Maybe we can get away with supplemental backup systems, or we can supplement with electric systems as opposed to needing that fossil gas as a total backup. So the technology's changed a lot, but people are already familiar with what heat pumps are.
Yeah. So, what is so ultimately, there was a settlement, there was a decision. What's the ultimate result? I mean, how are people going to experience this? Are there incentive programs? Are there investments being made? What does it look like in your community?
Yeah, so I mentioned going from 300 million down to half, so thinking about 150 million dollars. A portion of that, about 72, I think, is going to the actual supplemental supply. So again, the reliance on gas is still the most expensive part of this proposal. So when we think about shifting to electrification, like it's cheaper, at least in terms of this project, to look at it that way than to continue the gas side. So there's a portion of it that supports the supplemental supply. There's $49 million going towards the again, the non-pipeline alternatives, the electrification part of this. And so what we have seen is an increase in rebates over what the standard rebates are for Xcel Energy, trying to incentivize folks to take this on. And then also about 28 million, if I'm not mistaken, it might be 26 million towards that electric infrastructure upgrades. And so some of that electrical upgrade was already identified under other electrification proceedings. And then a very, very small portion of that was new to related to the Mountain Energy Project. So we're going to get some upgraded substations and some electric grid resilience, investment. But the bulk of that $49 million is really going into the pockets of residents and businesses in Breckinridge and our surrounding areas. And that's, it's a really important way to get consumer confidence, build the market transformation for heat pumps, and just help people get over those initial barriers of cost. And part of this is also, for our community, it's educating our workforce. So they have a very typical and standard heating system here in the mountains that it's really quite straightforward to install. And so really bringing the workforce along and having funding available for training, for contractor certifications to make sure that when the workforce is installing heat pumps, they're doing it to the specs that the mechanical systems have been set up to, and then also just making sure that these things are working in a cold climate.
Sure. So the decision, I keep calling it the decision, the settlement, the final decision's been made. Is there a particular timeline on this, or do they expect that this will get you the next 2 or 3 years, or is this really expected to last 5 to 10 years? Is there any sort of timeline on it?
Yeah, so the original proposal was a 10-year planning horizon. We were really, we really wanted a lot of milestones and check-ins, and so stakeholders advocated for checking in earlier and often. So some of the things that changed from the original proposal include there will be an interim filing in 2028. So the company has to come back and present all the progress that's been made, any shifting budgetary asks, et cetera, because there's sort of those 3 buckets: electrification, electric infrastructure upgrades, and then the supplemental gas. there might be a time in the future where we can shift the dollars between those buckets if one thing is working better than another. And we're, hoping for the MPA bucket to increase. Um, there was also sort of some timing around that spend, the $49 million spend to kind of not evenly distribute it, but look further out for spending more due to market adoption. But we really said, why not make it all available now if people want to do uptake earlier? Like, we should solve this problem now if we can. So there were a few things like that changed, but nothing major. But this is, Excel did apply for kind of a 10-year planning horizon in this case. And we've really said, well, let's check in much more frequently than that.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, you part of this broader, I mentioned before you work for the town of Breckinridge, but you're part of this broader coalition, Colorado Mountain Coalition. Are you all, at the end of the day, pretty happy with where things landed, excited to see how things move forward?
We're super excited. I think one of the things that we have demonstrated to the utility, not just that we were engaged in this proceeding, but also the level of engagement of our local communities in implementation. We've been working really closely with the market development team, really trying to shape what these incentives are. We've been able to share some really unique system characteristics that we know from our building department and from just our local market. The utility is looking at statewide characteristics, and they really have to generalize customers. Well, we're not the same customer as somebody living in Denver. And so I think there's definitely this two-way street that maybe is not very common in other proceedings, or the utility has a plan and they come in and that's the project they want to do. There's been a lot of engagement from local communities, not just on the climate side, but really trying to focus on affordability for our residents, which is also a challenge in mountain regions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it seems like this is a good example of, at the end of the day, we've got to tackle the pollution problem that's being caused in different ways, especially from gas powered anything. And so it seems like this is, you all really figured out a way to try to tackle that, but to try to do it in a cost effective way as well. Really help people move into heat pumps, figure out ways to reduce the overall cost on the gas side. So it seems like overall a really good story and a good thing to be following up on. So we definitely would love an update from you in the future, how it's going. Anything that I didn't ask you about or anything else that you want to add before we hop off?
No, I think it's a great opportunity to showcase how far the technology has come. We are not just in Colorado, but nationally, we are really in the midst of an energy transition. And where we're seeing challenges of affordability is because we continue to build out two full utility systems at once, right? And so we're in this horrible pain point where we just haven't made the commitment or the full transition, or there's just, we're working through regulatory and policy barriers to move to a cleaner electric system. And so it is challenging, and there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of misunderstanding around the technology. And so we're just really, really proud to be a partner with the utility, to challenge them on some of their assumptions, to show up as a community partner, and to say, like, we're going to embrace this and we're going to try to really make it work. And it remains to be seen how effective we'll move the needle, but according to Excel, they believe that this is the largest investment in a non-pipeline alternative proposal in the nation. And so to be at the center of this is a little scary, but it's also just really, really exciting. And we're here to answer people's questions and to help them understand this better, because this is not the only NPA that's popping up across Colorado. So yeah, thank you for shedding light on this project. We're really excited about it.
Absolutely. And so I'll put some links down below. If there's anything you want to share with folks who are watching this, I'll include that in some links down below. And for anyone who's watching this, make sure you check out some of our other Talking Utilities videos that we've done to see and learn about just all the different aspects when it comes to getting off of gas and moving towards a cleaner and more energy efficient homes and businesses in Colorado. So Jessie, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.